Solitaire Rose Radio, episode 73, Professor Elemental takes us to the School of Whimsy. I interviewed Professor Elemental, Paul, about a year ago, and I talked before that interview about how I was introduced to his music. And I am not a hip-hop guy. I have nothing against hip-hop. I'm a rockabilly guy. There's even a wonderful song by the Reverend Horton Heat, where he talks about how he's not the difference between death metal guys and rockabilly guys. And I've always been drawn to garage rock and rockabilly and sort of that very early bluesy sort of rock and roll. But there's also this big nerd streak in me. And nerd music, they're the people who are very successful at nerd music. There's, Weird Al and things like that. But now, more and more, it seems like as I'm discovering more and more about music, I'm discovering more of these little nerdy subgenres. For those of you who don't know Professor Elemental, he is a 19th century British explorer who also experiments on all sorts of things, has an orangutan butler, has traveled to Mars, and that's the character. And we talk about in the podcast how he's sort of moving out of the character and more into this kind of undefined sort of positive steampunk hip-hop, where the professor's almost tangential to some of it. He just had a new CD drop, School of Whimsy, which he's been talking about for a year. So it's been in the oven for quite a while, and I've been listening to it to and from work for the past week or so since the interview, and I absolutely adore it. It's amazing fun. It's very catchy, and there are certain songs on there, and I'll talk about when I review it, where I turn it up almost as loud as I would turn up Red Barchetta by Rush or Rockabilly Guys by Reverend Horton Heat, and I've had a few conversations with the professor over Twitter and Facebook, and we both have a deep love for certain kinds of comics. And the interview I did about a year ago, I'll have a link in the show notes. Go back and listen to that before you listen to this one, because it's a much better introduction. This is more, if you've listened to that, you'll get more of this. But it's a lovely hour conversation, and here you go. Well, we're promoting this thing that I got in the mail yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What did you get?
I got.
Oh, yes. Was it mine?
I got this.
Send it to you. Oh, good. I'm glad it arrived okay. Thank you for getting it. That's grand.
But you've been very busy for the last year too.
Oh my God, so busy. But although weirdly, I'm always busy doing shows, but this year I kind of decided to stop and try and remember what it was that I actually sort of signed up for, and actually just made loads of music and done loads of writing this year, which has been really nice. So I've been travelling quite so far afield, but it's been nice to sort of consolidate the professor a little bit and that kind of stuff.
Well, there were two things I wanted to talk about. The first is I am seeing you everywhere now.
That's true.
I can stream your animated series on Amazon.
I know. That sort of totally happened by not by fluke exactly, but the guy who I did that with, he's nice, but he kind of charges ahead with stuff. So whenever we've done something together, he will just suddenly ring up and say, "Oh yeah, it's on Amazon now." I'll be like, "What? What do you mean it's on Amazon?" So it took me by surprise as well, to be honest.
Because I stream a few shows on Amazon. They don't have a lot. They're not Netflix or anything.
No, it's few and far between, isn't it? They're quite good for movies, but they're not great for shows.
And then all of a sudden, there you are. You're being suggested to me.
Well, that's delightful. Yeah, and it's an interesting little project. That there are moments in it that I'm really super proud of, and there are moments that do make me go, "Oh, why did we do that? That's a terrible idea." So it's an interesting mix, but it was a good experiment. I enjoyed it.
And have you heard anything from Amazon where it's opened up new people to see your stuff?
Not as far as I'm aware, but then you just never know. Like, yeah, you never know when it comes to the connections you make. You can do the smallest little gig somewhere, and someone can turn up and say, "Hey, do you want to play this enormous convention in America?" Or you can do something really high profile. I remember when I did Phineas and Ferb for Disney, and I was saying to my other half, I was like, "Sweetheart, this is it. We are going to hit the big time. After this, the offers will be rolling in. Nothing." So you never know. You never know what's gonna do well for you and what's not.
That was actually something I was talking to my son about, who he's the one who introduced me to your stuff back when Fighting Trousers went viral.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he mentioned, "Oh, you've got to watch this. You've got to watch this." And when I finally watched it, it's like, "Oh yeah, that's very cool. I like that sort of thing." And then I started seeing Wired magazine wrote it up, and there were blogs posting about it. And I wanted to ask a little about what it was like when you went viral. Was that something that sort of exploded, or was it where it built slowly over time until you're seeing, oh, every day things are going up just a little bit more?
Yeah, it was a funny one. I don't have many regrets with the professor stuff, but I wish I'd taken more advantage of it when it happened. Like a lot of those things, you don't really notice you're in it. And actually, I probably, if I'd have been a bit more on my business, I could have shouted a bit louder. But it was a really odd one, particularly with Fighting Trousers, because I was caught between being delighted that it was helping me make a living for myself and getting a high profile, but also I was laced with the guilt of having got that by being really horrible to Mr. B, who's actually really nice. And he didn't want to battle me as well, so that made it a lot harder. If he'd said, "Yeah, brilliant, let's play the game, let's pretend we hate each other," but he didn't want to do that because he was just far too nice. He was just like, "I'm not," wasn't interested in that. So it was an odd one. There were times where I was able to really take advantage of it and shout about it and so on. But other times where I probably downplayed it more than I would have done, and I probably ended it a lot quicker. If he'd have been up for it, I would have done a few records back and forth to kind of keep that ticking along for a bit. But yeah, he's just too nice. He's too nice, damn it.
And obviously, he did not grow up watching World of Sport and learning about how, somebody's got to be the heel, somebody's got to be the baby face, and the fight just keeps going. That's the money's in the chase.
Well, exactly. I remember when it first came out, I emailed Moog. I really remember this, the guy who directed it, and I said, I feel a bit weird about this because, that's not the kind of person I am. I'm a nerd. I never get into fights, even pretend fights. I don't even get into fights on the internet. And he said, remember your role. Your role here is to be the aggressor. You're only, you're supposed to be kind of poking at him, and that's what makes this funny. I was like, yes, okay, good.
Yes.
Get it back in perspective. Because that's all, and it's the same with sports and the same with hip hop battles as well. I watch a lot of hip hop battles on the YouTube, and most of these guys are friends, or they're friends afterwards, or they find the whole thing hilarious. You can't take these things too seriously.
And well, the new CD showed up in my mailbox yesterday, so I
Oh,
haven't
just
had
in
it.
time, perfect.
I have not had a chance to listen to it because it's 5 in the morning here in the U.S.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, no, no. I understand. It's one. You pay your money. You get in the door. And but you have been talking about this CD for quite a long time, almost a year. It's been in the making.
Yeah.
And now that it's out, how do you feel about it? Is it where it's the grand finale or the grand finally?
Definitely, I was proper excited with the response. Actually, it's had loads of reviews. And everybody's been very nice about it, and just musically as well. We really did take our time, and I don't know. There's a lot of songs that I made that didn't make the album. Just I think having done it so long, I've realised that it works very well with the Professor now to collaborate with a lot of people. Like there's a few singers on the album and other rappers and stuff, and that keeps the Professor as a character quite fresh, and also stops it getting too annoying as well. I think he's been doing it long enough. It's not really enough for me to just pop up and go, "Oh, here's another song about tea." There needs to be a reason for him to be talking. So either a collaboration or a story to tell or something really worthwhile. So yeah, musically, I think it's the best one we've done. I say that without a trace of humility, but I am really, really pleased with it. It's
Wait,
lovely.
wait. No, no humility. Are you still British?
Exactly. It's very hard for us. Like, honestly, what you're supposed to do as a British person is say, yeah, it came out, yeah, it took ages, and I'm sorry, it's a bit shit. And then we're not really allowed to say that we like a thing that we've done. That's against all of our, instincts.
Which is where here in the U.S. everything we've done is the greatest thing ever.
Yes, but I have to say that was all that taught me so much when I was first starting out and I was doing these steampunk conventions in America, and seeing not only other bands but chatting to just having casual conversations, and it was really alien to me. People talking quite nicely about their achievements and things they were proud of and things they were happy with in their life. I really didn't know how to respond half the time, but actually, it's really good and it's really healthy. I think particularly as an artist, it's good not to be too down on yourself. You don't want to be a wanker and be like, I'm amazing all the time, because that makes you just a horrible person. But I think particularly that it taught me a lot about how to sort of promote myself and make something out of it by saying, yeah, I'm all right at rapping, I'm not bad at it, it's okay.
And one of the things that I like most about the professor is you've created this wonderful persona. And it's almost like you can imagine this character in almost any situation. But then also, you rap about what's going on in the world. On the previous CD, Professor Elemental and His Amazing Friends, you talked about the state of both hip hop and music. In that, hey, you got to get away from thinking the record company's going to do anything. Do it yourself. The more art you can create yourself, the better. Do it anywhere. Just be yourself. Did that go into this one as well?
Yeah, if anything, this one, a couple of people said that to me. They said there's a few songs where the professor character's almost been dropped entirely. There's particularly a song about going on tour and about, just all the trials and tribulations of what it's like to be on the road all the time. And that really is just me talking. And I think I have to have a bit of that. Otherwise, it's a bit limiting. And I think it would be getting a bit boring if it was just like, I've got a hat with a clock inside and I live inside a mansion. You need to have some depth, I think, from time to time. Not too much of that, because you want a bit of escapism, but I think it's nice. I think, and I've had an interesting debate with friends and online about politics in my show as well, because I don't really put much politics in my music, but on stage I'm quite political. In between the songs, sort of usually in context, and I try and make it funny, but there's things I like talking about, and I get booed sometimes, particularly in the current climate. You know how people can be very easily offended. And I found that interesting as to whether or not that's appropriate that I kind of add a bit of politics and stand up into my show. So, yeah, how much of me creeps into the professor over the years has been an interesting thing.
You actually wrote an essay a little while back about politics on stage and some people leaving during gigs.
Yeah, well, particularly during Brexit as well, because I was so keen that the I'm British song wouldn't be taken up by the people who voted for Brexit, because I thought it was such a stupid idea. So I rewrote Brexit at the time. Rewrote Brexit, that'd be nice. Rewrote I'm British. And made it into a kind of anti-fascist anthem and put it out as a single and raised money for refugees. And when I did it live, that sort of new anti-Brexit version, it was pretty tame. It wasn't saying, oh, you're all wankers or anything. It was all quite, gentle. But yeah, I had loads of people walking out particularly during that year. But then I also thought, all right, see you then.
Yeah, there is
maybe this isn't for you.
There is something to that because I'm what they call middle-aged, and I remember artists being very politically active through the 70s and 80s and 90s, yeah. And now I've moved into where I don't pay as much attention to pop music, but a lot of the creators that I follow are very political, and it's something that's always been there, and I wonder if it's a new thing that people are like, oh, I don't agree with this artist's politics, therefore I do not like his work.
Yeah, I think that is to a certain extent, because I mean, if I think about all of the films and particularly being into hip hop music, I mean, if I didn't listen to anybody whose politics I didn't agree with, I'd never listen to hip hop again. Like, so much of it is so very gun happy or even fairly Republican. If you look at someone like Jay-Z or somebody, it's a quite money orientated. I don't agree with that at all, but I can still appreciate the music. And I say with, I'm sure we've all got writers or film directors or comedians that have not exactly squeaky clean or have got politics we don't agree with, but you can't let that stop you enjoying a thing, I think.
I agree. And it's one of the things, especially hip hop, it started as kind of a very political movement. My understanding is it started very politically in the 70s. But
Yeah, absolutely.
and to say that, oh, well, it can't be political is crazy.
It is, but then I suppose I'm also, to try and not be too damning on the people who have booed or walked out. I can see to a certain extent. Firstly, they don't necessarily know about hip hop or understand it in that context because I'm there dressed up as a sort of steampunk mad professor. And there are some people, I don't agree with this, but there are some people who would say, well, I didn't come here for politics. I came here to escape politics. I've got my funny top hat on and I'm pretending to be in Victorian times. I don't want you talking about benefit cuts or the problems with how disabled people are treated. That's not what I'm here for. So I've got a certain amount of sympathy that people have come and they're sort of trying to escape reality, but not quite enough that I think it should curtail me talking about important things from time to time, particularly if I can make them funny. That's the
Yes.
key. As long as they're attached to like a joke and it's not just me ranting on about the Tories for 10 minutes. I think it's okay if there's a gag attached to the whole thing and it's within the context of making people think and laugh. Then it's fine. It should be fine.
Now, you've also got a Patreon.
Love the little Patreon. God, I love Patreon. And I love all the patrons within it.
And you give away free music on that thing all the time.
Yeah, a bit like my whole career. It's based on a combination of enthusiasm and fear that if I don't, people will stop giving me stuff. I'm really, I so love it and so appreciate it. But I'm really, I'm nothing if not prolific, and I do make an awful lot of music, and I love. Remember, we're both old, and you remember in the old days, people would make you like a mixtape or a mix CD.
Yes.
And I loved that, man. I just really used to love doing it as well. So that's one of the things I love doing on Patreon is making little compilations and giving those away. That's my favourite thing.
The other thing I like about it as being part of the patron is you're going to introduce me to stuff I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what that's what the other patrons that I follow are very similar like that. You should be able to share all the new stuff that's out there because there's a lot of good stuff out there. You just have to, it's just picking your way through the jungle, isn't it, really?
One of the things I've noticed, Theodore Sturgeon said 90% of everything is crap. And the reason he said that was he was an editor.
It's true, though.
But I think a lot of, if you're a comic fan, I just got the new previews. And it's a 600-page catalog. It's like, okay, I want to get a drink and somebody opens a fire hose.
Yeah, I know. It's too much.
And with music, I've got satellite radio, and oh look, here's 100 channels of music, all completely different. Anybody who says there's nothing good out there means that I think they're overwhelmed.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. I can't remember what the proper. It's like the tyranny of choice is a proper scientific concept, isn't it? The idea that it's very easy to get overwhelmed. I particularly see it with my kids. If I say, right, we're putting on a film, here's the film you're watching, they love it. If I say, well, look, here's Netflix, you could watch this, then they just start freaking out. It's too much for them. You've got to cut. And I think cutting down on your choices and specialising, I mean, you want to have space in your heart to find new things and good things, but you know what it's like with comics and movies and music, and particularly as you get older, you kind of know what you like, don't you?
Yes.
And actually, it's quite a relief sometimes for me thinking, do you know what? I'm just never going to watch that thing. It's quite a relief knowing that there are certain programs that have come and gone, and I never need to watch them. Just let stuff go. You can't possibly catch up with it now. You just let it drift on by.
The problem with that, with us, those of us who are comic fans and constant readers, is we end up with a house full of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So many books. I've been buying so many books. I've been sort of sneaking them in, like I've got a drug habit lately. I'm like, oh no, don't worry about that package. It's just something for my work. Wedge another book into the shelf. Well, my children wonder why they haven't got the money to go on holiday this year because Daddy's got into Ray Bradbury. That's why. Now shut up.
Well, at least his stuff's still in print.
I know, my God. I just read Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I was like, how have I not read any of his stuff before? I ruined the book because I wouldn't let it out of my hands. So I took it in the bath, I took it while I was eating. It's like wet, covered in food stains. I was like, it's such a good book. It's great.
And me being grown up in the Midwest of the U.S., it's almost like Ray Bradbury is part of our lives here
Yeah, I can
because
imagine
he's a
actually. Yeah.
Midwest writer who writes about the central U.S. So for you, it's like opening a new world. For me, it's like, oh yeah, that's very much like how we talk and how we are around here.
And I think that's the same with being a British nerd with a lot of the sort of cultural things, particularly in years gone by when I was little. There's a certain exoticness that comes with American stuff. The idea of a city as big as Gotham City, or, just these big, bold ideas you get in American horror or science fiction. We do kind of small, cozy folk horror and stuff really well, but America has always been it's just astounded me with its largeness, and it still does, to be honest. I love it.
Now, when you come to the U.S., I imagine there's a little bit of a culture shock, but what are the things that are the same at the conventions? Things that are all conventions have these things.
So I was thinking I might write a little sitcom about conventions, particularly because they do all have the same things, and the beauty being that nerds are the same no matter where in the world we are. Like we all have the same shared values and interests, and we're all there's always a lot of slightly socially awkward but well-meaning people who talk a little bit too long about their chosen subject. There's always an absence of horrible people. There's no one being nasty or violent or usually getting too drunk. Everybody is polite and kind and nice, and that's particularly true in America and Canada. Like the kindness of strangers and the lengths that people will go to host you or show you around their city. That always blows me away. So I think nerds are the same no matter where you are, and there's a few characters that you'll always see at every convention. But I've got a soft spot in my heart for all of them. Really, I think it's really nice.
Now, you said you haven't been going out as much. What's coming up for the next year? Are you going to be traveling more? Are you going to be working more on music?
Well,
Is
I think
Amazon knocking on the door saying, "Hey, this thing's selling"? So,
yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, suddenly let's get a bidding war between Netflix and Amazon for my long-awaited animated series. Yes,
there.
that's good. So yeah, no, I think the rest of the year, and now I've spent a lot of time just being in and seeing the family and making music. I've got a couple of books coming out, which would be really nice. There's a big Art of the Professor book, and I've also had a friend of mine has been working with me on an autobiography of the Professor, an entirely fictional and ghost-written autobiography, which I think would be hilarious. So that'll be nice. And then I'm just going to travel. I've got gigs in Portugal and the Netherlands and Canada and America. It's very, very tough to get into. Thanks for that. Next year, America, but this year it was just too difficult.
Now, how old are your children?
They are 9 and 6 years old.
Okay, so they are vaguely aware that you may be known by somebody other than them.
Oh yeah, definitely. And they're really fascinated by the idea that some kids that I meet think the professor is real, and think I live in a mansion with a monkey and stuff. They think they quite like that secret knowledge that I'm just another grumpy dad like all the other dads.
Now, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is how children like the professor so much.
Mm.
And you have children showing up at your gigs. One of the things, and we're both comic nerds,
Oh yes.
that I am fascinated by is that comic companies have kind of said, yeah, we've already got the nerds. We've got them. They show up every Wednesday. They're fine. And they're
Yeah.
focusing on children. DC's going to be putting out a new line of young adult novels. Random House just hired one of the editors at First Second and said, yeah, create a children's line of books. And Random House
Okay.
has a couple dollars behind them.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Anything that gets kids reading, even outside of the nerd stuff, you've got to be all for that. Yeah, that's a
Yes,
great idea.
and then Marvel announced yesterday we have these things in America called little free libraries where you just set up a weatherproof box in your yard and you put books in it and people can
Oh,
come and take the books and put books in,
that's lovely. That's really lovely.
and Marvel and Disney have set up a bunch in some major cities as kind of a pilot program with graphic novels that they made especially for that.
Wow, that's cool. Really cool.
Yes, and it's one of those things where there are some older nerds who aren't much happy with the focus on people who aren't them.
There's always some of those, isn't there, in every
Yes,
field?
but I'm looking at the companies and they're going, yeah, we need to hook the kids, and you've got this audience that's made up of older nerds and children, and I'm wondering what sort of things that you're planning to kind of tap into that children's market.
Funnily enough, I'm doing exactly the same, but in my tiny, small scale way. I often, this is a secret I've never revealed. I've started copying what some the big two do, Marvel and DC, in some of their strategies for putting things out, but doing it on stealing the bits of it that I like and doing it in a much smaller way. Like the new album's got a cliffhanger at the end, and the next album that I'm going to do is going to be a big sort of cosmic Jack Kirby, Grant Morrison comic thing. But I want to do it like a big comic event, and the same as what you're talking about with the little kiddie things. I'm going to do a young people's album with the professor and somehow involve kids as well. I'm not quite sure how, but get kids to send me ideas that I'll then make into a selection of really silly songs. But because all of my stuff is particularly with the professor, and that's another reason I don't put politics in his music. I try and make 90% of it all ages friendly. I think I don't have to do an awful lot to make it kid friendly, really, other than maybe like try and do a live kids show. Because in theory, it should be stuff that like the best comics are, older people and younger people can enjoy if I've pitched it right.
Now, did it surprise you that children were drawn to your character?
No, not at all. I think anything where you see an adult, when you're little and you see an adult who is really incompetent and foolish and getting things wrong all the time, I think that's really delightful for little kids to see. Like, if there's a kid that you're, I don't know, in a situation where you're hanging out and there's a kid being a bit nervous. If you do a pratfall or you do something stupid, that normally says, "Look, I'm a kind of safe grown up to hang out with and engage with." And I think it's the same with the professor because he tries to look important, but he's getting it really, really wrong most of the time, particularly on stage. That I think is something very that kids go, "Oh yeah, okay, we get that." It's nice to see grown ups being silly.
Now, I've not been blessed to see the professor on stage other than a few clips on YouTube, and I imagine that there are a lot of people who've listened to the songs and kind of have an image of what it is that you do. So, is the stage just kind of a greatest hits? Do you tell a story on stage? What is your stage show like?
Oh, I've really changed it actually the last year or so because I've done so many shows and I was having the same people come to the shows. I was like, well, I've only got so many songs. Like, people are going to get, I can't not do the songs people know, but surely they're going to get bored. So I've changed it now. What I do is every 3 or 4 shows, I write a whole new theme. So it'll be about creativity or mental health or how to be a rapper. And then I write a whole stand up show which has got the songs in between it. And as time going on, the songs are getting shorter and the stand up's getting longer. But just always trying to find new ways to engage with the audience as well. So there'll always be points where I get people up on stage, or I'll get into the audience and get the entire audience on stage, or something. Every single show I do, I make sure there's something that no one's seen me do before because I've never done it before. So there's that really, yeah. So I try and keep it varied, and that's partly for the audience and partly for my sanity as well.
Well, that's one of the things. Stand-up comedy. A lot of nerds are fascinated by stand-up comedy, and
Absolutely.
and they will craft. You know, I, when you get into it, it's like the old saying is, dissecting comedy is like dissecting a frog. You learn a lot, but the frog doesn't do well.
Yes.
And they learn exactly where to pause and where to speed up and what phrases to use. It seems very much off the cuff, but it's not. It's highly practiced. Does that figure into what you do, or is it more kind of, I'm just going to go out there and have a conversation?
I think it is the former, actually, for the most part. Even if you're writing, yeah, I write new jokes that no one will have heard before, and sometimes they go horribly wrong. But I've learned the patterns and the structures that even if the joke's not great, at least it's being delivered in a way that's recognisable as a gag, so people kind of know when the punchline's supposed to be there. Whether or not it's funny, that's a whole other thing. Sometimes that takes some work. But I think for the most part it is pre-planned, but. I increasingly, again, just to kind of keep improving things, the best comedians I see, there's a chap in England called Daniel Kitson, and I saw him recently, and he was doing crowd work, and there was nothing pre-planned about it. He couldn't have, it was purely based on what people were saying, and that's a real aim for me. I love involving the audience, but I'd like to get to a stage where I'm able to wing it more and more and more. And that's, again, it just means that it's fresh. And you know what it's like, if you see a comedian or you see a musician, the bit where they either mess up or they talk to a member of the audience or they talk about the town they're in and it's something completely specific to that town, that's the stuff you remember, probably more than the rest of the whole show. So you want to try and make your stuff memorable, I think.
As someone who's a Rush fan, I'm always fascinated by how they would so carefully control everything, to the point where they didn't want live recordings that they didn't mix exactly like the album.
Really? That's
Yes.
So like a slightly different, a different approach to the whole thing.
Yes, because Neil Peart was such a perfectionist.
Well, that's the key, isn't it? And a lot of musicians are proper perfectionists, and I'm the absolute opposite. As soon as I've done it, I'm like, yeah, that'll do. Let's do something new now. What's next? Which is good and bad. It's not always the best approach.
Well, I think everybody's got their own style of doing things.
Yeah,
and one of the things about the Professor is this relentless positivity that you put forth in both your music and the Professor persona. Even if everything falls apart, he's still, well, that worked, let's move on.
Yes, exactly that. I'm glad you spotted that. Yeah, I think that's key to the whole thing. That no matter what happens, he's pretty much fine with it.
And how much of that comes from you, and how much of that is you've developed this character who knows his own life?
I think I mean the Professor draws from lots of things. I might have said this last time we chatted, but it draws from things like sort of Daffy Duck and Toad Hall and stuff like that. Particularly Toad Hall, he's very much like that. When his car crashes, like, well, poop, poop, I'm going to try something new now. So there is definitely a bit of that character. But I am kind of like that, and because I've always been. I grew up again, as an older nerd, you'll know this. When it wasn't popular to be a nerd, so we were out on a limb, and I didn't have any other friends who liked the things that I liked. So no one liked comics, no one liked horror films or hip hop music. So I spent my entire time going, "Oh, this is brilliant," and everyone going, "No, it's shit, Paul. I hate it." And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's amazing." And I'm still like that now. I'm still showing people films they don't want to watch, and like, Plastic Man's obviously the best superhero. So there's a lot of options. So yeah, I think it is different. I definitely have that, and I think the older I get, the more I realise how important that is. I read a good thing the other day talking about the importance of, if you're feeling miserable, just faking it until you feel happy again. That actually is a really good thing to do, because no one's happy all the time, and it's all right to feel miserable. But if you do feel down and you want to feel happy, just pretend, and sooner or later you do. It comes true.
And the fake it till you make it. What's the other phrase I always... Kurt Vonnegut said, be careful what you pretend to be, because eventually that's what you are.
That's absolutely true. Exactly that. Yeah, pretending to be a mad old man for a good 10 years, and increasingly, I am a mad old man. There's nothing I can do about it.
Well, one of the things that we discuss on the internets is comics.
Yes, let's talk comics.
And British comics, in a way, kind of fascinate me because they're so different from American comics. And the one thing I wanted to ask about is the format. Here in the U.S., if you want to lose a lot of money and have your book canceled, do an anthology.
Yes.
And if you want to lose your money really fast, do it weekly. And you've got a comic that's been doing a weekly anthology for over 2,000 issues.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, all of our whole history of comics, they were all anthologies. They're all these. Even when I was little, all the children's comics like the Beano and things, they are small little anthologies. That's been our whole way of doing things for years.
And even when Marvel would do comics over there, I remember in the 70s where they were letting us know about it here in the U.S. There was, The Mighty World of Marvel was the name of
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, exactly. And they changed it so you'd have like 4 pages of a Hulk story. It'd be so annoying. Like this.
Well, and especially since, here in the U.S. they were done as 17, 18, 19-page stories.
Exactly. And that's still, and actually Marvel and DC still reprint over here, although they reprint whole issues, the British versions of, Batman or whatever, you'll get like 100-page chunky comic that's still an anthology basically. We are still stuck to that format, albeit an anthology of whole comics rather than little nuggets these days. I
And
quite
I,
like it.
and as when you first started reading comics, when you got your hands on the British stuff, you've got that, oh, the next part's going to be out in a week.
Mm.
When U.S. comics came in, how did they read differently than the British comics? And how could you get hooked on 4 pages of a Hulk story, 4 pages of a Spider-Man story, and here's 4 pages of Daredevil sitting around talking?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's 4 of the really boring pages of a court case he's had. Oh, that's good. I think again because they were hard to get hold of and they were quite exotic, and you would still get proper Marvel and DC comics in our newsagents, but you'd get them really randomly. So I would just have to just take pot luck. It was good. It was a good way to discover loads of new stuff, but it would be so frustrating because if you got a Marvel comic like a traditional one that had to be continued at the end, the chances of you ever finding the next part of it was very, very unlikely until you grew up and then scooped them all up. So I think, yeah, but comics were around, but they were very much more just purely aimed at children. Things like 2000 AD, they were scary when I was a kid. They had some really terrifying stories. Things like Nemesis the Warlock just used to give me bad dreams. Like a friend who wet the bed when he read Nemesis the Warlock. Terrifying. And actually, what was really nice, I went to a lovely convention called the Sci-Fi Weekender, just gone, and all of the big 2000 AD artists were there, some of my real heroes. And it's great to see that when they are hanging out, not only do they hang out as a little group, but they are as their comics are. They're really anarchic and punky and wild. They're the people you want to be partying with at 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't turn up to their signing; it's like 3 hours late because they haven't gone to bed yet. And I was really pleased to see that. They say don't meet your heroes, but all of the writers and artists I've met of 2000 AD, they really have lived up to the sort of ethos that the magazine's got, of being slightly anarchic and weird and brilliant.
And is 2000 AD kind of the center of the comic universe in England, or is it, that comes out, but we're into this thing?
Well, to be honest, I think American comics just swamped over English comics. English comics in their traditional sense, the sort of old, quite cozy little things we used to have, like the Beano and Dandy. We'd have loads and loads of these titles when I was little that were just humour comics for kids. They died out as these things do, as they sort of fall out of fashion. But because Marvel and DC got so big, and all of the attached media that comes with them, just steamrolled pretty much the comic scene in England. So things like Warrior, where V for Vendetta first came out and stuff, they were kind of quite short-lived. So if anything, 2000 AD it's the kind of cornerstone of UK comics, and lots of stuff still spirals out of there, but it tends to be small press things. We've got a brilliant small press scene over here, and if you go to a comic convention over here, some of the comics that people make that most people never hear of are just absolutely glorious. They're brilliant.
I 2000 AD is one of those things that I get into on and off.
Yeah, same as me, to be honest. I love that it's there, but I don't follow it. It was never a big part of my childhood.
And the collections are where a lot of my interest goes. You talked about Nemesis the Warlock. Uh, that art was it's still a little disturbing.
It's really messed up, isn't it? And I always remember feeling like, wow, because he was the first artist to get banned by the Comics Code, wasn't he, Kevin O'Neill?
Yes.
And that was in the sort of era where films were getting banned for being too scary and stuff. And I remember just thinking that was the coolest thing ever. The idea that his art was just too dangerous for the Comics Code.
And as someone who's really into comics, what do you think is the fundamental difference between a British comic and an American comic?
I think it's probably the same sort of differences that we have culturally. American comics tend to be big and bold and have these heroic ideals of things to, that up until recently, they're often, things to look up to. The idea of a superhero is an idealized version of somebody. But then British comics have definitely got an anarchic spirit. They're quite sarcastic and sniping. They can be quite self-depreciating. If there's a figure of authority, then he's normally being poked fun at. Or if there's a superhero, then it's a parody of a superhero where he's absolutely awful or secretly really corrupt or something like that. So I think ours tend to. And if you think about the old British invasion of, what all Neil Gaiman and Morrison and Moore did to DC in the 80s, that was why it shook it up, because it took these ideals and said, oh, what if they're not so amazing? What if there was a darker, weirder version of that? So I think that's it. I think we kind of tend to be weirder, darker, and more anarchic. But then in tandem to that, we're rubbish at superheroes. Our superheroes are awful. They just never really work because they're just better as American things, I think.
Well, and also when you read Judge Dredd, it's like, if you really think about it, it's like, wow, they really think that we're awful.
It's not, yeah, but don't take that too personally. It's more that they think everybody's awful. Like if it had been based in, if you go to Britain, when he visits Ireland, they're all just a bunch of like drunkards. when there's an English thing, they're all kind of like corrupt, sort of secret, government corruptions and things going on. So it's definitely, it's not a resentment of America. It's just a general feeling that everybody's terrible, I think.
But then on top of that, your superhero that has done the best is the Doctor.
That's true, actually, yeah.
Who's actually, in most incarnations, he may have a rough exterior, but he really loves people.
Well, that's very true, actually, and maybe I'm being a little bit unfair on sort of the idea of our British media always being sarcastic and anarchic and stuff, because it does usually, if it's good, it's got a heart in there. I mean, that's why I never liked Judge Dredd, because there's no kind of soft heart to it. It's all just jagged parodies. But Doctor Who does have that, doesn't it? There's a lovely softness and humanity to the whole thing. Like I've watched loads and loads of the new Doctor Who's, but whenever I've caught those little beautiful moments, there's some really lovely life lessons within it. It's gorgeous.
And to draw it back to the professor's kind of the same way. He may make a horrible mess, but he's doing it out of something wonderful and joyous and just this exploring. He wants to know everything.
Yeah, I think that's it, like an enthusiastic curiosity. In fact, there's a few songs earlier on and stuff that probably has never come out where he was quite a dark character. When I first started him, he had a really sinister, like, he would kidnap people and, experiment on them and stuff.
Yes, there was the one song there was the one song about taking people's teeth.
Yeah, exactly, and that was a hangover from the weird stage show he used to be part of. But I'm quite glad that I abandoned that and made him a lot nicer. The world needs a few nice eccentrics. I don't think he needs a dark edge at all.
So, comic-wise, what is exciting you lately?
I have to say, it's that Tom King Batman. I'm just obsessed with him. I just think he's the best written Batman I've seen for ages. There's a story at the moment with Booster Gold, and I was a really big fan of the JLI comics, the old Giffen and DeMatteis ones with Kevin Maguire, and it's got the real spirit of that. So that's probably the thing I get most excited about. I'm cautiously looking forward to Bendis on Superman, although a couple of things I've read so far haven't blown me away, but I'm kind of, we'll see how that goes down. I think, there's still there's a few things to get excited about. There's still a lot of rubbish, though, isn't there? What was going on with DC with that whole? Here's the new generation of superheroes we've ripped off from Marvel and aren't very interesting. What was that? The Terrifics was the guy in the comic shop said to me the Terrifics was like they green screened a comic book, and I was like, that's exactly what it's like. Awful.
Well, DC seems to be in a let's create 52 comic lines. Because it's like, okay, the metal stuff, the New Age of Heroes, that's going to be one line. And then, this Batman Dark Knight, that's the start of another comic line. And they're going to have
They often do. They're always trying to put things in little batches, DC. And it doesn't, I don't know. Here's all the Flash related. Here's all the Green Lantern ones. It's not. I don't know. I don't find that a very useful strategy. I think DC, out of the two of them, has still got more right than they've got wrong. They're still on the right track with a lot of things. But like your earlier quote about 90% of everything being rubbish, I get a lot of them out of the library that I wouldn't bother buying, and like it's very rarely that I read a Marvel or DC thing that I've borrowed and go, "Wow, I've been missing out big time." Like most of them are still, by the numbers. I
Well,
feel a bit sorry for Marvel though. I feel like thanks to that awful, they got a lot of bad press really for just doing the stuff that they've always done. I don't know quite why it was so controversial for a bit, with Marvel and their sort of, the Comics Gate nonsense and all of that kind of rubbish.
I tend to ignore those people.
Yeah, definitely best so. But it sort of creeped into the mainstream, and it creeped into sort of mainstream conversation. I probably shouldn't even be talking about it now. But I found it weird because if anything, Marvel haven't done anything done anything that innovative. So it's not like they've changed the way they do things. In fact, they probably need to change it up a little bit more because they've got a bit boring.
One of the things about that whole thing, and I've talked about it relentlessly on my other podcasts, is we want comics the way they used to be. And then Marvel puts out, hey, here's Gary Conway on Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And they're not buying it.
Yeah,
Here's
exactly.
Mike Barron doing the Badger. Nobody buys it. Here's Chuck Dixon on Bane. Nobody buys it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That is exactly right. Is that they're in an absolute no-win situation. So stop trying to please those people and just make fun comics themselves. I mean, there are good things out there that I appreciate that exist, but aren't for me. Like, I don't know, Squirrel Girl. I love that it's there, but it's not my comic particularly. And there are, and there's enough. There's a couple of nice. Chip Zdarsky or whatever his name is doing some nice stuff, isn't he?
Yes.
That's all quite old school and quite pleasing.
He surprised me because when they announced, oh, we're doing a new Howard the Duck series, as somebody who's a huge Steve Gerber fan, I just kind of, please don't. Leave it alone.
Yeah, it can be done really
Don't-
badly, can't it?
And then I read it because people said, you're going to like it, you're going to like it. And it was different, but it was wonderful.
Yeah. He's got a real warmth to his writing. I'm not always the biggest fan of his storylines. I find them like the endless sort of time travel things a bit convoluted. But his dialogue and the sort of warmth of his writing is really, really lovely. Yeah, it's nice. What mainstream ones are you liking at the moment? What am I missing out on?
Well, if you're not reading Saga, you're really missing out.
Oh yeah, I do get Saga. That's really
Saga
good.
is beautiful
Saga is gorgeous.
as is Paper Girls.
Oh, Paper Girls, not heard of that. That sounds good.
It's another Brian Bond book.
Oh, is it? I'll write that down. Pretty much everything he's ever written is good, isn't it? He's one of those writers. I can't think of anything he's done that's been terrible. He's brilliant.
And he could take something that I would go, well, I'm not interested in that, and make me very interested in it.
Yeah, definitely. I remember that series Ex Machina with that was about the mayor of New York. Like,
Yes.
about him, and it was really good. It was great.
I actually just got done reading. One of the things that I love that Image does is this series has a beginning, middle, and end.
Yes, I know. It's lovely, isn't it?
And then I wait till it's over because I have no patience.
Yeah.
That's why I don't read that much. That's why I don't read that much fantasy anymore. Everybody says, "Well, aren't you watching Game of Thrones?" I'll watch it after I read the books, and then I look and it's like, "Oh, he still hasn't put out the next." Yeah, I'm never going to read that, am I?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm with you on that one.
But I just read Revival.
Oh, yeah, is that
Mike
good?
Norton.
Okay.
Wonderful, full of twists and not at all what I expected, and it was one of those where it's wow, he's juggling a lot of balls in the air, and I don't know if wow, they pulled it all together, didn't they?
That's so nice, isn't it? That's
It
so
is.
brilliant when they do that. That's lovely.
And of course, anything Mark Waid does, I'm going to love.
Yeah, me too.
It's that simple.
Even when it's not my favourite thing, I've got such a lot of time for him. I'm reading his Captain America at the moment, and it's just as good as his Daredevil was. He manages to make old heroes seem really fresh all the time. It's great.
And he's got this love for the old characters, but he doesn't want to redo what they've done in the past.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, he does exactly that. He always, will take the best bits of them and take them somewhere new. I read it's an old comic now, but I finally got around to buying all of Irredeemable.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
God, that took me by surprise. I was like, oh yes, that's because it's Mark Waid, isn't it? Yeah.
And I believe, is that the one that Peter drew? Peter. Oh, I can't.
Peter somebody probably drew
Yes.
it. Yeah, I don't know off
It,
the top of my head.
the
But it was
art
great. It
was.
was really great. It was a really nice sort of step away from some of the quaint and cozy comics he's done to like really savage and horrible. It's brilliant.
Yes. And there's just so much that comes out. But with Tom King, he's a writer who just kind of came out of nowhere. It's like, oh, he's doing a Vision series.
Yeah.
Wow, that was good.
I know. I've just bought his novel. I didn't realize this, but he did a text novel before he did any comics about
Yes.
superheroes. And have you read it?
I have not read it yet. My stack of books to be read is kind of frightening.
I know they're in danger of toppling over and killing us. But yeah, I'm just about to go there. But he's turned into one of those writers like Grant Morrison that literally anything that he does now, I'm likely to just snap up. Same with Brian K. Vaughan. I think again as I get older, it's all about the writers for me, and I think that's also where Marvel and DC struggle sometimes. They've got perfectly good art, but they just don't seem to have a big enough pool of exciting writers. I don't know. Whoever's in charge of finding new writers for Marvel and DC need to up their game a bit, because I know there's amazingly talented people out there, but there's a lot of same old, samey, safe stuff out there as well.
And I think a lot of it is when you get into comics, it, um, you start in the indies, then you go to Marvel and DC to make money, and then once you've got enough money and cred, it's, oh, well, I've got all my own ideas. I'm going to go over here so that I own it.
Yeah, definitely. And also, these days there's also the likes of Netflix and stuff, and TV steals away people like Ed Brubaker or Mark Miller or whoever. They either do their own independent stuff, which is quite understandable, or they go off and do TV things instead.
Well, Ben Edlund, who did the Tick, everybody says, well, why can't they put out a decent Tick comic anymore? Because Ben Edlund got hired by the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and now he's doing Supernatural, and I think TV pays a little bit more.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. But then I don't know. I still quite like that comics can be at their best. They're a sort of hotbed of hidden talent, and people take up. We get the stuff first. As nerds, we still get the
Yes.
good writers first. Tom King may eventually do nothing but movies and TV one day, but we got his stuff first, and I'm all right with that.
Yes.
I think that's really nice.
And boy, DC was smart. It's like, oh, he's really kicking ass on Vision. What, Batman?
Yeah, I know, there's a slight, not an air of desperation, but that's a pretty big jump, isn't it? Please take Batman, someone. We just need some good writers. We've got one, we could do with two. No disrespect to any other DC writers, I'm sure there are some good ones out there.
Oh, and Mr. Miracle is just amazing.
Oh,
Just
isn't it just the
amazing.
most beautiful comic ever? I'm just absolutely, yeah. I'm one of those ones that I read and then reread, like I used
Yes.
to when I was a kid. It certainly is that good.
And boy, when that comes out as the big thick book with all the back material and behind the scenes, it's like, yeah, I want the Criterion DVD version of that book.
Yeah, definitely. What's the artist's name? Mitch Gerard?
Garage.
Wow, he's really good on Twitter. Actually, he's one of those people I follow on Twitter who's always putting little sketches and cool art and stuff. He's well worth a follow. It's lovely.
Now,
Um,
have you read their previous book, Sheriff of Babylon?
oh yes, which is the one thing I haven't read. Actually, I need to get to that.
Yeah, I know that feeling. It was Free Comic Book Day here Saturday. I
Oh
don't know if they
yes,
have it.
yes. Was there anything good? Is there anything you recommend trying to track down?
I haven't made it through that, but it's one of those days where I go and hit a bunch of comic shops and used bookstores, and I was able to load up on, because the shops are, hey, this is our busiest day of the year, we're going to put stuff on sale.
Yeah.
So I just loaded up, and I'm set for the summer.
Such a nice feeling, isn't it? That just like I could be stranded on a desert island, but as long as I've got this collection of reading material, I'm fine with that. Lovely.
Now, is it a big deal in the UK? Or
Well,
do
it's
shops
not
kind
so
of,
huge. I think. No, they still embrace it enthusiastically. I don't know the mechanics of how it works, but I was chatting to the comic shop owner, and he said that actually Free Comic Book Day in England, something blah blah blah, shipping, complicated stuff, it actually costs the comic shop quite a lot of money to give away the comics over here. Um, so I've got a lot of respect for any comic shop that does embrace it. I think it pays off because more people do come, and it's become a bit of a thing. But it's not quite as big in the same way that sort of comic book stores aren't quite as big over here. But yeah, our shop did it and did it well. And God bless David's Comics in Brighton remains my favourite shop in the entire universe. I've
Now,
just
are you
realised. I've just realised. Sadly, I'm going to have to go because I've got to go and meet my mum. That's the kind of rapper I am.
well because that's where your cred is.
Yeah, exactly. That's the level my street cred is. Meeting my mum on the street.
Well, I'm in about 2 weeks. I'm going to have a review of the new CD because by then I'll have time to listen to it.
Oh yes,
And
super.
and I always want to thank you for the time. Now tell people about the Patreon.
Oh
Get
yes.
them to spend money.
Join that Patreon. If you just type in Patreon and Professor Elemental, you can be part of it. And I always think it's a bit shit when people say, "Oh, give us $1 and you can look at a picture of my face." So even at the lowest, I always think that's a bit rubbish. Like, I'm giving you $1 every month. I want something. So even at the sort of lowest levels, I tend to give away like a little musical compilation every couple of months. And higher than that, I give away all sorts of stuff. Sometimes I just send hats to people in the post. Just send out lots of random stuff. So yeah, come and hang out with me there. And if you want to buy the album, it's called School of Whimsy. And if you want to taste it, you can go to YouTube and type in "Good Morning, Professor Elemental," and there'll be a lovely music video for you there.
And if you purchase the CD, it gets sent to you with. I recommend getting the notebook and the stickers and all the other fun stuff because then when you get it in the mail, first off, it's been touched by human hands, and second, you open it up and it's just kind of you shake things out of an envelope. And how often do you get good mail? How often?
Exactly. I really think that should always be the way. I always try and send some extra weird stuff in the post. Sometimes the kids help me by drawing really bizarre pictures and all of the orders that come out. So when people buy stuff, they'll be like, "Why is there a massive pig on my envelope?" But that's it's all about the bonus stuff, I reckon.
Well, as always, thank you for the time, and also thank you for the music. I got to tell you, the Professor Elemental and his amazing friends kind of became my go-to in the car
Oh man,
when
thank
there's
you. That's so
nothing good on
nice.
the radio because of just kind of uh, the relentless positivity of that CD. And I want to thank you for that because there are times when you're going from job to job and it's like, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore. And it kind of lifts your spirits. And it's an amazing gift that that gives to people.
Wow, that's such a beautiful thing to say. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to wake up at 5 in the morning and, and chat to me about it. It makes a huge difference. That's really lovely. Awesome.
Well, have a lovely lunch with your mother and take 2 tea times today because you've
Oh,
been
do you
very
know
good
what,
on the
Mike? Thank you
show.
very much indeed. Lovely. Cheers.
And there you are, a chat with Professor Elemental. I was listening to the podcast as I mix it, and I was just struck by how much fun he's having just doing the interview. And it reminds me there's a wrestling podcaster I enjoy, Colt Cabana, who now does commentary for Ring of Honor. And on one of his early Art of Wrestling podcasts, he talked about how he'd made the decision to get on the happy bus. You could be on the sad bus or you could get on the happy bus. And I've talked in the past as well about how in 1999 I kind of decided that I was going to put aside being cynical and thinking that that people are terrible and everybody's out to get something. And it's been a long journey for me to not just keep that up, but continue it. And Professor Elemental's songs really sort of hammer that home of create your art, enjoy your life, be happy being you. Uh, so if I was a much better podcaster and had much better equipment, I would have done this podcast a lot like David Letterman does his interviews on Netflix, where we talk for a little bit and then here's a snippet of music from the album and stuff like that. But instead, I've just let the interview play through. There are links to the Patreon in the show notes. I really enjoy his Patreon. There are days where it's like I've gotten 3 emails from the Patreon. Oh, we posted this, and here's this video, and here's this song, and just all sorts of wonderful things. You really get your money's worth. And just go back, buy through the catalog, go watch the videos on YouTube. I can't recommend enough how much I enjoy his stuff. And hopefully he'll get to come to a convention, and maybe if he does come to a convention near here, I might come out of retirement. Don't let Joe hear that. He'll never let me hear the end of it. Now, on to podcasting stuff. Starting next Friday is the 4th novel in Solitaire Rose Novelcast. The 2nd After the Fall novel, which is set 5 years after civilization has fallen to a zombie apocalypse. It's called Graceland. It starts next week, and you can go over and listen to the 3 novels that are already there at novels.solitairerose.com. I'm very proud of those. I'm very happy that they're out there, and it comes out every other Friday. What do I do the other Fridays? Well, just like what's going to happen this Friday, a new episode of Bad Advice, where myself and Wolfie Be Bad are read questions by Dangerous Dan Moore, and we give bad advice. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably also a fan of Crazy Comics and Stories, which comes out every Monday with a new episode. And we've got all sorts of fun stuff planned for the summer. Lots of episodes there. Part of the conversation that I removed when the professor and I, Paul, were chatting was that I've done over 500 podcasts. Every time I think of that, my eyes just kind of glaze over a little bit. But yeah, I've done over 500 podcasts. So hopefully I'm getting good at this. One of the ways that I'm allowed to do these podcasts is that I have sponsors. And we have a single sponsor this time. And here he is.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy, Danny J. Quick, lead writer of Ace Blade, the Vegas Vigilante comic, and I am here to give you Solitary Rose listeners the deal of a lifetime. I'm going to give away a free comic, a free Ace Blade comic over on our website. We just launched our final Kickstarter for Ace Blade, the Vegas Vigilante, the 100-page edition, and we want to give all of you Solitary Rose listeners first dibs at it. So if you go over to our website, www.fourthwallpros.com, download Ace Blade #1, use the promo code ROSE at checkout, and you can get that comic absolutely free. If you enjoy it, go over to our Kickstarter and then back us, and you can get the rest of the story there. I really appreciate it. We really need your help and support, so I hope you enjoy that. And that's it for me. So until next time, stay vigilant, my friends. Bye.
I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for checking in. Again, go over, buy the new CD. I'm holding it in my hand right now. It was shipped over from England, and really a lot of fun, very enjoyable. You'll love it too. And I want to thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with more stories.